My name is Eleanor. I'm 36. And for the last 2 years, my entire world has revolved around two things. My 8-year-old daughter, Lily, and keeping the memory of my late husband, Mark, alive through the family traditions he cherished. Last week, my in-laws called me 3 days before Thanksgiving and told me not to bother cooking for them this year. They said, and I quote, "We just need some space." So I canceled everything. But then, on Friday morning, they showed up on my doorstep, panicked and begging. What they didn't know was that their cruel little power play had just led me to discover a secret my husband left behind, a secret that was about to change everything. If you've ever felt taken for granted by the people you love most, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. And make sure to hit that like button and subscribe, because you're going to want to see how this story of family, food, and long overdue boundaries unfolds. You see, my relationship with Mark's parents, John and Mary, was never what you'd call warm. I met Mark in culinary school. He was the charming business student who believed in my talent more than I did. I was the girl from a working-class family who cooked with her soul. His parents made their disapproval clear from the start. It was never overt, never something I could directly challenge. It was in the way Mary would compliment my food by saying, "It's amazing what you can do with such simple ingredients," implying my background was all I knew. It was in the way John would introduce me as Mark's wife, Eleanor, with a pause before adding, "She cooks," as if that single verb defined my entire existence. But Mark's love was a shield. He never let their subtle digs or backhanded compliments get to me. After we got married, he was the one who insisted on hosting every holiday. "My family needs you, Ellie," he'd say, wrapping his arms around me in our kitchen. "You're the glue. Your food is the only thing that brings them together without a fight." And for 10 years, I was. I became the family's designated chef, planner, and emotional caretaker. Mark's younger sister, Sarah, and her husband, Tom, were the golden couple. He was a lawyer, she was in marketing, and they were always praised for their busy, important lives. My life, dedicated to raising Lily and building my small home catering business, was seen as quaint, a hobby that kept me occupied. After Mark died suddenly from a heart attack 2 years ago, that dynamic intensified tenfold. My grief was immense, a physical weight that made breathing feel like a chore. In the days following his death, I found myself not only navigating my own sorrow but managing theirs as well. I was the one comforting Mary when she would break down, the one making endless pots of coffee for John as he sat silently staring, the one fielding calls from concerned relatives. It was as if my own heartbreak was secondary to theirs. I remember standing in the funeral home, finalizing the arrangements that I was paying for, and overhearing John complain to Tom that the flower arrangements seemed a bit extravagant, as if my final tribute to my husband was an inconvenience to his sense of fiscal prudence. I bit my tongue and paid the bill. I endured it because I thought, this is what family does. We carry each other. But my role solidified into something less like a beloved daughter-in-law and more like an unpaid service provider. The holidays became an expectation, not an invitation. Let me give you an example. Last year, for Lily's 7th birthday, I spent a week planning a magical garden party for her. I baked a 3-tiered cake that looked like something out of a fairy tale. John and Mary promised to be there. An hour after the party started, Mary called. "Oh, Eleanor, something's come up," she said, her voice breezy. "Sarah and Tom decided to have a last-minute barbecue. You know how at Island, we'll just have to catch up with Lily later." They never did. They didn't call, didn't send a card. They chose a spontaneous barbecue over their only granddaughter's birthday. When I saw the pictures on Sarah's Instagram later, my in-laws laughing, holding drinks, posing with Sarah's friends, a piece of my heart chipped away. Lily just looked at me with her big, sad eyes and asked, "Did Grandpa and Grandma forget me?" I hugged her tight and lied, telling her they were just very busy. My catering business was another source of silent friction. I had started small, just doing meals for friends, but my reputation grew. Last spring, I landed a huge gig, catering a week-long corporate retreat for a major tech company. It was the biggest contract of my career, the kind of success that felt like a validation of all my hard work. I was exhausted but exhilarated. When I told John and Mary about it over our weekly Sunday phone call, hoping for a sliver of pride, my father-in-law just nodded slowly and said, "Well, that's nice, dear. Just make sure you're not too tired to handle Christmas this year. You know how important that island." There was no congratulations, no curiosity, no acknowledgement of my professional achievement. My success was only relevant in how it might inconvenience them. I was the family cook, and my business was just a distraction from my real job. This was my life, a constant, low-grade dismissal, a quiet understanding that my efforts were expected and my feelings were secondary. I endured it for Mark and for Lily, because I believed that keeping this fractured family together was what he would have wanted. But I had no idea that the foundation of my patience was about to completely disintegrate. Thanksgiving was Mark's favorite holiday. It was our holiday. He loved the chaos, the smells, the way the house filled with people he loved. The first year after he passed, I recreated his favorite menu down to the last detail. The cider brine turkey, the sausage and cornbread stuffing he'd learned from his grandmother, the sweet potato casserole with the perfectly toasted marshmallow topping. It was agonizingly painful, seeing his empty chair at the head of the table, but it was also healing. We shared stories about him, we laughed through our tears, and for one day, it felt like he was still there. This year, the second Thanksgiving without him, I was determined to make it just as special. The planning started in October. I called everyone to coordinate, just as I always did. John and Mary, Sarah and Tom, they all confirmed they'd be there. Sarah even had a special request for a gluten-free pumpkin pie for one of her friends she was bringing along, a request I'd already started testing recipes for. For me, this wasn't just a meal. It was a ritual of remembrance. It was my way of telling my daughter, and myself, that even though our world had changed, our family's love and memories would endure. My kitchen was already starting to show signs of the impending feast. Jars of homemade cranberry sauce lined the counter, and my detailed prep schedule was taped to the fridge. The phone call came on the Monday before Thanksgiving. Just as I was pulling my master prep list together, a pen tucked behind my ear. It was Mary, my mother-in-law. Her tone was flat, devoid of its usual forced pleasantries, a sign that she was about to deliver a verdict, not have a conversation. "Eleanor," she began, "John and I have been talking, and Sarah agrees with us. We've decided we're not going to come over for Thanksgiving this year." I was stunned into silence. I gripped the phone, my grocery list crinkling in my hand. My eyes darted around the kitchen at the evidence of my love and labor. "What? Why? Is everything okay? Is someone sick?" There was a pause, and I could hear her take a deep, theatrical breath, as if steeling herself for my inevitable, and in her view, overly emotional reaction. "Everything is fine. It's all become a bit much. The whole big production. It's emotionally draining. We think it's time to move on from all of it. We just need some space this year. A quiet day just for us." The words hit me like physical blows. A bit much. Emotionally draining. Move on. It was as if the very traditions I was working so hard to preserve in her son's memory were being dismissed as a burden, a performance I was forcing upon them. "Move on?" I whispered, my voice trembling. "Mary, this is for Mark. It's how we keep him with us. It's for Lily, so she remembers her father. Well, perhaps that's the problem, she said, and the coldness in her voice was unmistakable. Perhaps constantly looking backwards is holding us all back. You need to understand, Eleanor, our grief is different. We lost a son. We need to find a new way to heal. We've made our decision. Sarah and Tom feel the same way. We're just gonna have a small, simple dinner at their place. My mind was reeling, trying to grasp the cold logic of her words. A small, simple dinner? Without me and Lily? Their son's wife and child? So, you're having Thanksgiving without us? I asked, the question sounding naive even to my own ears. Don't be so dramatic, Eleanor. It's not personal, she said, using their favorite phrase to dismiss my feelings. It's just what we need to do for ourselves this year. We just need a break. A break from what? From me? From the granddaughter who had her father's eyes? A break from the memory of their own son? The line went dead before I could ask. I stood in my kitchen, the silence of the house pressing in on me. Lily came in from the living room, holding a crayon drawing of a turkey with 5 stick figures next to it: Grandma, Grandpa, Aunt Sarah, Uncle Tom, and her. Mommy, can we put this on the fridge for when Grandma and Grandpa come? She asked, her smile bright and innocent. And in that moment, I had to look into my daughter's hopeful face and figure out how to tell her that, for the first time in her life, family wasn't coming. The next 48 hours were a blur of quiet heartbreak and logistical unraveling. The first thing I had to do was cancel everything. I called the butcher, a kind man named Mr. Henderson who always saved the best turkey for me. Everything all right, Eleanor? He asked, concern in his voice. Oh, just a change of plans this year. I lied, my voice cheerful and fake. I called the farm stand to cancel the crates of pumpkins and squash. Each call felt like a small betrayal of Mark's memory, an erasure of our life together. My kitchen, usually a hive of activity and delicious smells in the days before Thanksgiving, was silent and sterile. The festive gourds I'd bought for the centerpiece sat on the counter like sad little orphans. I tried to be strong for Lily. I told her there was a change of plans, that this year it would be a super special Thanksgiving, just the two of us. We would make her absolute favorite food, my creamiest macaroni and cheese and gooey chocolate chip cookies, and watch movies all day in our pajamas. She tried to be brave, her lower lip trembling just a little. But Aunt Sarah said she was bringing her friend who wanted to try your gluten-free pie, she said softly. The fact that my 8-year-old remembered a detail like that, a detail that proved this was a coordinated, deliberate exclusion, made the pain even sharper. It wasn't a sudden decision. It was a conspiracy. My attempts to get more clarity from the family were met with a wall of polite, unyielding silence. I sent a text to Sarah, my sister-in-law. Hey, just heard from your mom. Really sad we won't be seeing you guys. Lily is pretty crushed. Is everything really okay? I stared at the screen, watching the 3 dots appear and disappear for what felt like an eternity. She was typing, deleting, retyping. Finally, a curt reply pinged on my phone. Mom explained it. We just need a low-key day. Don't make it a big deal. Don't make it a big deal. 3 words designed to make me feel small, to frame my hurt as an overreaction, as if erasing me and my daughter from a family holiday was a minor inconvenience, like changing the brand of coffee. I wanted to text back, to rage, to demand an explanation, but I knew it would be pointless. It would only feed their narrative of me being the dramatic one. The real cruelty, however, came on Thanksgiving Day itself. I had spent the morning trying to create a new, happy tradition for Lily. We made a pillow fort in the living room, strung it with fairy lights, and were halfway through a Disney movie marathon, the smell of baking cookies filling the air. For a few hours, I almost forgot. Then my phone buzzed with a notification. It was an Instagram tag. My heart sank. Sarah had posted a photo. It was a picture of the four of them, John, Mary, Sarah, and Tom, raising glasses of what looked like expensive champagne around a perfectly set dining table. The caption read, "A quiet, simple Thanksgiving this year. Sometimes less is more. So thankful for this core group." Thadia. Core group. The words were a knife twist. We weren't part of the core. We were the more that they needed less of. But what stung the most was the background of the photo. It wasn't a simple dinner. The table was laden with food. I recognized the serving dishes. They were my mother-in-law's wedding china, the ones reserved for the most important occasions. And on the table, I could clearly see a large, beautifully roasted turkey, a bowl of sausage stuffing, a boat of gravy, and what looked suspiciously like a sweet potato casserole. This wasn't a break from the tradition. It was a hostile takeover. They had recreated my menu, in my absence, to prove that I was replaceable. They didn't want space from the holiday. They wanted space from us. They had stolen the tradition and erased the person who had faithfully upheld it in their son's name. I felt a surge of anger so intense it made me dizzy. I wanted to call them, to scream at them, but what would be the point? They had made their feelings perfectly clear. Instead, I put my phone away and focused on my daughter, who was blissfully unaware, giggling at the movie. That night, after she was asleep, I found myself scrolling through the comments on Sarah's post. Friends were writing, "Looks delicious," and "Happy Thanksgiving." No one knew the story behind the photo. To the world, they were a perfect family. I was the invisible woman. Later that day, my best friend, Chloe, called. She was spending the holiday with her own family, but had a sixth sense for when I was struggling. "Hey, how's your quiet Thanksgiving going?" she asked, her voice gentle. The dam broke. I told her everything, the phone call, the canceled orders, Sarah's Instagram post, and its poisonous caption. I cried. Not with quiet sadness, but with raw, ragged sobs of anger and betrayal. They called it the core group, Chloe. What does that make me and Lily? The disposable part? Chloe listened patiently, letting me vent until I was exhausted. When I finally finished, her voice was firm, laced with the righteous anger she felt on my behalf. "Ellie, this isn't about them needing space. This is a power move. Since Mark passed, you've been the matriarch of that family, whether they admit it or not. You hold the history, the traditions. You are the living embodiment of their son's best decision. They couldn't stand it, so they tried to take it from you, to prove they could do it without you." Her words resonated with a terrifying clarity. She was right. It wasn't about grief or moving on. It was about control. They resented my central role in the family, a role I never asked for but inherited through love and loss. They wanted to reclaim their position, and the only way to do that was to push me out. "What do I do, Chloe?" I asked, wiping my tears. "I feel so powerless." "For now, you do nothing," she said wisely. "You enjoy your daughter. You let them have their hollow little victory. Trust me, people who are that cruel and that incompetent usually find a way to screw things up all by themselves. You just need to be ready when they do." Her words were prophetic. I tried to put it out of my mind, focusing on making the rest of the day special for Lily. We baked cookies and delivered some to our elderly neighbor, who was alone. We built a Lego castle that took over the entire living room floor. As I tucked Lily into bed that night, she hugged me and said, "This was a fun day, Mommy. I missed Grandma and Grandpa, but this was fun." Her resilience was my strength. But as I lay in bed that night, scrolling through that hurtful photo one last time, I felt a cold resolve settling in my heart. Something had to change. I couldn't let them treat us like this ever again. I just didn't know how I would ever find the strength to make them stop. Friday morning arrived with a gray, drizzly chill that matched my mood. I had planned to spend the day taking Lily to the movies, a Black Friday tradition Mark and I had started to avoid the shopping crowds. It was meant to be a day of escapism, of trying to forget the gaping hole left by our family. I was in the kitchen, making pancakes, another small attempt at creating joy when the doorbell rang. It wasn't a gentle chime. It was a series of sharp, insistent presses. I wasn't expecting anyone. Chloe was out of town, and all my catering deliveries were scheduled for the weekend. I wiped my hands on my apron, a flicker of annoyance running through me, and opened the door. My heart didn't just stop. It plummeted. It was all four of them: John, Mary, Sarah, and Tom. They looked awful. My father-in-law's face was pale and strained. Mary's eyes were puffy, and she was wringing her hands in a gesture of pure anxiety. Sarah, usually so polished and put together, had her hair messily pulled back, and there was a frantic, wild-eyed energy about her. They looked like a shipwrecked crew who had just washed ashore. "Eleanor, my father-in-law, John," said, his voice raspy. We need your help." I just stared, my mind struggling to reconcile the arrogant core group from Instagram with the pathetic posse on my porch. Help? After they had so deliberately and cruelly cut me out? "What's wrong?" I asked, my voice flat. I made no move to invite them in, keeping my hand firmly on the doorknob. "It's the turkey," Mary blurted out, her voice cracking. "It's ruined. Completely ruined. I think I might have given us all food poisoning." Sarah jumped in, speaking quickly as if reciting a list of disasters, her words tumbling over each other. Mom forgot to thaw it properly, so it was still frozen in the middle yesterday morning. We tried to cook it anyway, but it was raw inside and burnt on the outside. We ate around the edges, and the stuffing Tom made was gummy like wallpaper paste, and the pies were a disaster. Sarah's gluten-free pie was like a rock. We ended up eating frozen pizza and some very questionable takeout. Frozen pizza on Thanksgiving. The image was so pathetic it was almost comical, but their expressions were anything but funny. They were desperate. "And," John continued, looking deeply ashamed, "we were supposed to have friends over tonight for leftovers. Important friends of Tom's, from his law firm, the senior partners. We can't possibly serve them what we have. It's a complete and utter disaster. Tom's career could be on the line." I finally understood. They weren't here to apologize. They weren't here because they missed us or felt guilty. They were here because their own attempt at a perfect holiday had failed, and they had a social engagement to salvage. They had come crawling back, not out of love, but out of social desperation. They didn't need a daughter-in-law. They needed their caterer. The sheer, unmitigated audacity of it was breathtaking. They had kicked me out of my own family tradition, recreated it poorly, and now they were on my doorstep, expecting me to swoop in and fix their mess. And then came the sentence that shattered the last remaining thread of my patience, the words that would echo in my mind for years to come. Mary stepped forward, placing a hand on my arm as if we were the closest of confidants, her voice dropping into a conspiratorial whisper. "Eleanor, please, we know you must have food. You always make extra. It's what you do. Could you just pack up a meal for us? A turkey breast? Some of that wonderful stuffing you make, a pie? Just enough for 8 people. It would save us from total humiliation." She didn't ask how I was. She didn't apologize for hurting me or my daughter. She simply assumed that, like a well-stocked pantry, I would have a perfect Thanksgiving meal on standby, ready to be deployed at her convenience. She saw me not as a grieving widow or a wounded family member, but as a resource, an emergency food service, an appliance. In that moment, watching their expectant, entitled faces, something inside me snapped. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was a quiet, cold, and final click. The part of me that had always strived to please them, to earn their approval, to keep the peace for Mark's sake, it just died. I looked past them, at the gray sky, and I realized Chloe was right. They had screwed it up all by themselves, and now they were asking the person they had just thrown away to clean up the mess. I met my mother-in-law's pleading eyes, and for the first time, I felt nothing but a cold, clear certainty. I finally knew what I had to do. A calm I hadn't felt in years washed over me. It was the calm of a decision finally made, of a burden finally laid down. I looked at the four of them standing on my porch, their faces a mixture of desperation and expectation, and I gave them a small, tight smile. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice even and clear. "I can't help you." Their faces fell in unison. "What do you mean, you can't help?" Sarah demanded, her tone shifting instantly from pleading to indignant. "You're a caterer. This is what you do. You must have something." As you know," I replied, keeping my voice level and looking each of them in the eye. "I canceled all my food orders after your mother called. The 22-pound turkey, the fresh produce, everything. I have nothing prepared. This year, my daughter and I are having macaroni and cheese and going to the movies." I let that hang in the air for a moment. "I suggest you call a restaurant. I hear some of them offer pre-cooked holiday meals. You need to hurry though, they sell out fast." With that," I said, "I hope you figure things out. Have a good day," and gently closed the door in their shocked faces. I leaned against it, my heart pounding, half expecting them to start banging or shouting. But there was only silence, and then the sound of them retreating down the walkway, their voices a low, angry murmur of disbelief. Lily came up behind me and tugged on my shirt. "Who was that, Mommy?" "Just some people who got the wrong house," I said, scooping her into a hug that was as much for me as it was for her. That act of closing the door was a declaration of independence, but I knew it was only the beginning. The rest of the day, I felt a strange mix of empowerment and dread. I had finally stood up to them, but I knew the fallout would be coming. That evening, after Lily was asleep, I found myself drawn to Mark's old office. I hadn't touched much in there since he died. It was still his space, filled with his books, his scent, his presence. I sat in his leather chair, running my hand over the worn wood of his desk, and I just let myself miss him, tears silently tracing paths down my cheeks. My eyes fell on a small, sleek external hard drive sitting next to his monitor. It was one I didn't recognize, not one of the clunky ones he used for work backups. Curious, I plugged it into his laptop. It was password protected, but on a whim, I typed in Ellie and Lily 15, our standard password format with the number of years we'd been together. It clicked open. There was only one folder on the drive, labeled, "For my girls." My breath caught in my throat. I opened it. Inside were dozens of video files, dated over the last year of his life. The first file was titled, "Read Me First." It was a text document. With trembling hands, I opened it. "My dearest Ellie," the letter began. "If you're reading this, it means I'm gone, and I am so sorry. I hope you found this drive on your own, in a moment of peace. But I have a feeling you might have found it because my family finally pushed you too far. I saw it, Ellie. For years, I saw the way they treated you, the way they dismissed your work, your feelings, your light. I tried to shield you, but I worried what would happen when I wasn't there. I know you. You would sacrifice your own happiness to keep the family together for my sake. Please, don't." Tears streamed down my face. He had seen it all. He had understood. "These videos are my journal," he continued. "My thoughts. But they're also for you. A record. And more importantly, there's something else. For the past 5 years, I've been setting money aside from my bonuses in a separate investment account my parents don't know about. I set up a trust fund for you and Lily. It's substantial, Ellie. Enough for you to buy a new house, to expand your business, to never have to depend on anyone else again. My lawyer, David Chen, has all the details. I wanted it to be a surprise for our 15th anniversary, but now it's your freedom. Use it, Ellie. Build your own traditions. Don't let them diminish your light. You are the strongest, most brilliant person I've ever known. I love you forever, Mark. I clicked open the first video. Mark's face filled the screen, smiling his familiar, gentle smile. He looked tired, but his eyes were full of love. He talked about his day, and then he talked about his family. He recounted the incident with Lily's birthday party, his voice filled with a quiet anger I had rarely seen. He talked about his father's dismissive comments about my business. He was documenting it all, creating a testament to my reality, validating every hurt I had silently swallowed. I spent the next 2 hours watching, crying, and feeling a profound sense of being seen and loved. He hadn't just left me with memories, he had left me with a shield and a sword. He had left me with proof, with financial independence, and with his explicit permission to let go. The next morning, my first call was to David Chen, Mark's lawyer. He was kind and efficient, confirming everything. The trust fund was worth over $500,000. It was immediately accessible. My mind, which had been clouded with grief and anxiety for 2 years, was suddenly crystal clear. I knew exactly what my next steps were. This wasn't just about a ruined Thanksgiving anymore. It was about reclaiming my life. They had wanted to erase me from the family narrative. They had no idea I now held the pen. And Mark had left me a hell of a story to write. A week later, I initiated the confrontation. I didn't do it with anger or shouting. I did it with the quiet, devastating precision of a chef executing a perfect dish. I sent a simple group text to John, Mary, Sarah, and Tom. I need to discuss the future of the holidays and some estate matters Mark left in my care. Please come to the house this Sunday at 2 p.m. It's important that we are all there. The bait was irresistible. The phrase, "estate matters," was sure to pique their interest, and the formal tone promised something serious. They all confirmed within the hour, their curiosity overriding any lingering resentment from the porch incident. I spent the weekend preparing, not a meal, but my evidence. I queued up 5 specific clips from Mark's video diary onto my laptop, each one a damning indictment of their behavior. I had the letter from Mark printed out, and the contact information for David Chen ready. When Chloe offered to come for moral support, I accepted. She sat quietly in the kitchen, out of sight but a comforting presence, a silent guardian angel with a fresh pot of coffee. They arrived exactly at 2 p.m., looking nervous and a little defiant, as if they were walking into a disciplinary meeting. I had arranged the living room chairs in a semicircle facing the large television, where I had my laptop connected. I remained standing, a deliberate choice to command the space. "Thank you for coming," I began, my voice calm and steady. "I know things have been tense since Thanksgiving. You came to me for help, and I turned you away. I want to explain why." My father-in-law, John, spoke first, his tone defensive. "We understand you were upset, Eleanor, but it was a family emergency. We thought we could count on you." "You've always been able to count on me," I corrected gently. "For 10 years, I have cooked, cleaned, planned, and mediated for this family. I did it because I loved Mark, and I thought it was what he would want. But I recently discovered that I was wrong." I could see the confusion on their faces. Sarah smirked slightly, crossing her arms, as if she thought this was just another one of my emotional speeches. "You said you needed space to move on," I continued, looking directly at Mary. You described my efforts to honor your son as an emotional burden. You decided to create your own tradition, without his wife and child. And when it failed, you came to me, not with an apology, but with a demand for my services. You didn't see a grieving family member. You saw a solution to your catering problem. Now, that's not fair, Mary started, her voice trembling. We were just stressed. Let me finish, I said, holding up a hand. For 2 years, I have wondered if I was being oversensitive. If, as you've often implied, I make too big a deal out of things. I've questioned my own perceptions, but you see, Mark was watching, and he left a record. With that, I picked up the remote and pressed play. Mark's face appeared on the 55-inch screen. He was in his office, the video dated about 6 months before he died. He looked directly into the camera. "Video diary, entry 34, he said, his voice filling the silent room. Ellie catered that big charity gala tonight. She was the star. Everyone was raving about her. I've never been more proud. But we got home, and there was a message from my mother, not to say congratulations, but to remind Ellie that she's on dessert duty for Sunday dinner. It's like they can't see her. They can't see her talent, her hard work. They just see a service." I watched their faces. John's jaw was tight. Mary looked pale. Sarah's smirk had vanished. I fast-forwarded to another clip. This one dated a week after Lily's disastrous 7th birthday party. "I'm so angry I can barely speak," Mark said, his voice thick with emotion. "They skipped her party for a barbecue. I saw the pictures. They looked so happy. How could they do that to her? To our little girl?" And they put Ellie in the position of having to defend them, to make excuses for them. It's not right. It's a pattern. They take her for granted because she's kind. They mistake her kindness for weakness. Mary flinched as if struck. I played another clip, one I hadn't expected to find, from right after the funeral. Mark had apparently made it months prior, as if anticipating the future. "If I'm gone," he said, his voice heavy, "they're going to lean on her. They're going to make their grief her responsibility. They'll forget she's grieving too. They'll forget she lost a husband. They'll only remember they lost a son, and she'll become the vessel for all their pain." Finally, I played the last clip. It was from just a month before he died. He looked so tired. "I went to see David Chen today," he said. "I set up the trust. It's done. Ellie and Lily will be taken care of. Maybe it's morbid, but I have to plan for the worst. I have to know that if I'm not here, Ellie has the freedom to choose her own life, her own happiness. She won't have to keep fighting for their respect, because she won't need anything from them. She can just be free. God, I hope she chooses to be free." Oh, the video ended. I turned off the screen and faced them. They were utterly shattered. Mary was openly sobbing, her hands covering her face. John looked like he had aged 10 years. Tom was staring blankly at the wall, while Sarah was looking at me with an expression I couldn't read, a mixture of horror and, for the first time, something that looked like respect. "So you see," I said quietly, "this isn't about one ruined Thanksgiving. It's about a pattern of disrespect that my husband saw, and that he has now made impossible for me to ignore. He didn't want me to be your glue anymore. He wanted me to be free." I took a deep breath. "So here is the new tradition. From now on, Lily and I will be celebrating holidays in our own home, on our own terms. You are welcome to be a part of our lives, but it will be by invitation. It will be based on mutual respect and genuine love for Lily, not obligation. The free catering service is closed. The role of family emotional caretaker is vacant. I am now just Eleanor, Mark's widow, and Lily's mother. And that is enough." I let them sit with that. the finality of my words echoing the finality of Mark's. The power dynamic in the room had not just shifted. It had been completely and irrevocably shattered, broken apart by the truth spoken by a man they could no longer ignore. No one knew what to say. The silence that followed my declaration was the most profound I had ever experienced in that house. It was the sound of a 2-year-old illusion evaporating into the harsh light of truth. Finally, my father-in-law, John, cleared his throat. He looked at the blank television screen, then at me, his eyes filled with a shame I had never seen before. "He saw it all," he whispered, more to himself than to anyone else. "My son saw it all. And he never said a word to us." "Oh, Clay." Mary was still crying, but her sobs were quiet now, mournful. Sarah and Tom just stared at the floor, the usual arrogance completely drained from them. There were no arguments, no justifications. Mark's words, delivered from beyond the grave, were irrefutable. They couldn't argue with their own son. "I think it's time for you to go," I said, not unkindly. "We all need some time to process this." They left without another word. I watched from the window as they got into their separate cars, no one speaking to each other. It was like watching 4 strangers leave a funeral. When the last car pulled away, Chloe emerged from the kitchen and wrapped me in a huge hug. "That was the bravest thing I've ever seen," she said, her voice thick with emotion. That evening, for the first time since they had called, I felt a sense of peace. Lily and I ordered pizza and ate it on the floor of the living room while building our Lego castle. There was no cloud of expectation hanging over us, no bitterness about being excluded. We were a unit, a family of 2, and it felt whole. When I tucked her into bed, I told her, "Daddy left us a special present to help us build a new life." I didn't need to explain more. She just smiled. The days that followed were quiet. The angry texts I had anticipated never came. Instead, there was a week of complete silence. During that time, I met with David Chen and began the process of accessing the trust. The reality of it was staggering. It wasn't just a safety net, it was a launch pad. The first thing I did wasn't business-related. I took Lily out of school for a mental health day. We drove to the coast, ate ice cream for lunch, and flew a kite on the beach. It was a day of pure, unadulterated joy, the first of many. I started dreaming for the first time since Mark died, not just about surviving, but about thriving. I drew up a business plan to expand my catering company, to maybe even open the small bistro I had always talked about. I started browsing real estate listings for a small house with a yard for Lily, a place that held no ghosts, a place that was entirely ours. The first to break the silence was Sarah. She sent a long, rambling text message a week later. It was a mess of apologies, excuses, and self-pity. She admitted she had always been jealous of my relationship with Mark, that she felt my quiet competence was a judgment on her own life. It wasn't the clean apology I might have hoped for, but it was honest in its own dysfunctional way. I replied simply, "Thank you for your honesty. I need time." My mother-in-law called next, her voice fragile. She wanted to see Lily. I knew this was her way of trying to bridge the gap. "We can meet at the park next Saturday for an hour," I offered, establishing my first real boundary. "Just you and Lily and me." The old me would have invited her over, cooked for her, tried to smooth things over. The new me knew that healing had to happen on neutral ground, on my terms. This was my new dawn, and the sun was just beginning to rise. 8 months later, I was standing in the doorway of my own bistro, the Ellie Plate. The name was a tribute to Mark. He always used to say that anything I made transformed the plate it was on. It was a small, sunny space with 10 tables, an open kitchen, and a menu filled with the kind of comforting, soulful food I love to cook. The grand opening was tonight, and the place was already booked solid for the next month. The trust fund Mark left had allowed me to take the leap, to invest in myself and my dream without fear. It felt less like a business venture and more like a promise fulfilled. We had also moved. 3 months ago, I'd bought a charming little 2-bedroom house with a big backyard in a neighboring town. It was closer to Lily's school and had a beautiful garden that we were slowly filling with herbs, flowers, and a small vegetable patch. It was our sanctuary, a home built not on a fractured past, but on a hopeful future. Lily was thriving. She had joined the school's art club, and her bright, happy drawings now covered our refrigerator, no longer competing for space with anyone else's schedule. The quiet sadness that had shadowed her since her father's death was finally lifting, replaced by the carefree joy of a child who feels safe, seen, and cherished. My relationship with Mark's family had found a new, fragile equilibrium. We were not the close-knit family I had once tried to force us to be, but we were something. It was a relationship built on the stark reality of the boundaries I had set. The monthly visits in the park with Mary had continued. They were often awkward at first, but she was trying. She started asking about my business, really listening to the answers. She even brought a small clipping about local food entrepreneurs she'd found in the paper for me. One afternoon, she admitted, "We realized we never properly grieved Mark. We just expected you to do it for us." It wasn't fair. It was a stunning moment of self-awareness. John remained more distant, his shame still a palpable barrier. But for Lily's 8th birthday, he showed up with the gift. He had clearly chosen himself a high-powered telescope, because he remembered her saying she wanted to see the stars. He stayed for the whole party, watching her with a quiet, mournful pride. He even came over one weekend and helped me build a swing set in the backyard, working in comfortable silence. It was his way of apologizing, through actions rather than words, and I accepted it. Sarah and I had the most complicated path. After her initial text, we didn't speak for months. I learned through Mary that she and Tom were having marital problems. Apparently, without the family buffer and the drama to focus on, the cracks in their own relationship had become impossible to ignore. One day, she called me out of the blue and asked if we could meet for coffee. She looked different, less polished, more tired, but also more real. "I was a terrible sister-in-law," she said, her voice raw, "and a terrible aunt. I see that now. There's no excuse. I was so caught up in being the successful one that I resented you for being the loved one. I'm so sorry, Ellie. I hope one day you can forgive me." "I'm working on it, Sarah," I told her honestly. "But forgiveness and trust are two different things. Let's start with being honest." And the real justice, if you could call it that, wasn't about them suffering. It was about them being forced to finally confront themselves, stripped of the scapegoat they had always used to avoid their own issues. Their hollow victory on Thanksgiving had led to a long, cold winter of self-reflection. Without my cooking to gather them, without my emotional labor to smooth their rough edges, they had been left alone with each other, and they hadn't liked what they saw. They were now in the slow, painful process of building something real, something honest, for the first time. My justice was simpler. It was the sound of Lily's laughter in our new backyard. It was the satisfied smile of a customer tasting my food for the first time. It was the quiet peace I felt at the end of the day, in a home that was truly mine. Mark had wanted me to be free, and I finally was. Free from expectation, free from disrespect, and free to build a life that was as full and beautiful as the love he had given me. Looking back, that awful Thanksgiving was both an ending and a beginning. It was the end of a long, painful chapter of trying to earn love that was never freely given. I learned that tradition is meaningless if it's not rooted in genuine respect and kindness. You can't hold a family together with stuffing and pie if the core ingredients of love and appreciation are missing. It's like trying to bake a cake without flour, it will always collapse. The greatest lesson Mark left me wasn't the money. It was the permission to value myself. His love, even after he was gone, gave me the strength to close one door so that I could open another to a life of my own making. I learned that sometimes the most powerful act of love for your family is to establish firm boundaries, to teach them how you need to be treated. And if they can't learn, the most powerful act of love for yourself is to walk away and build your own table, inviting only those who are truly thankful to have a seat there. My life now is richer and more authentic than I ever could have imagined. I have my daughter, my dream, and a quiet, unshakable sense of my own worth. I no longer cook to please others. I cook to share joy, and that has made all the difference. So, now I want to ask you all, have you ever had to make the difficult decision to break a family tradition in order to protect your own peace? Share your stories in the comments below. I read every single one. And if this story resonated with you, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to put themselves first. Thank you for listening. Remember, you deserve a seat at a table where you are celebrated, not just tolerated.